Well, today's agenda is a kind of a wide open one. We've brought some expertise onto the call. We often have Brad and Jen on to talk about legislative issues and legal issues. We've also brought Greg and Jay on. We know that we have districts in transition related to superintendent search. And for some of you, you've maybe holding something close to the vest that might be coming up in upcoming months, as superintendents in January often announce retirements. And so we brought them on to have any conversations or questions that you might have on that. A couple of things that I would like to put out there for conversation one, and we can do it in the chat. Just in listening to people this weekend, I am interested, if you are still seeing kind of a regular group of citizens coming into your school board meetings and open comment, if you could share, like, is their focus still on masking and COVID? Is it CRT? I'd like to get a little better flavor for what you're seeing in your communities. I've heard some in the LGBTQ space, so if you can post it and we can talk about it too, but if you could do that. And the second thing is, you may have questions on this, so I'm going to try to be proactive and kind of give people a heads up as well. If you haven't seen any of these questions in your district coming out of the conference, we now have kind of a conversation, and I don't think it's amongst hundreds and hundreds of people, but it's definitely a conversation out there that we've received calls and Facebook posts on. We renewed a resolution at the Delegate Assembly on Thursday night under our general resolutions, and it was on communicable diseases. And if you were at Delegate Assembly, you know that it got removed from the consent agenda to be talked about. And in that, there's a paragraph that deals with vaccination. And this has been on our book since 2010. It was amended in 2015. Really speaks to MASB saying that we support vaccinations for children that are able to get vaccinated. This resolution has nothing to do with COVID. It isn't it wasn't a new resolution we were putting forth in that space. And we had a member of the Delegate Assembly posted on their website saying MASB supports vaccination. I voted no. How did your school board member vote? We've watched that go out into the Facebook world, onto MASB's Facebook page, where I did then respond and say what I just told all of you. This is a resolution that's been on the books for a long time. It's really speaking to the vaccines that are currently required in law, that you all have to make sure that kids either are getting that vaccine or they've used the legal process to opt out of that. And so I bring it up to let you know. I think Jen or somebody else mentioned, or Brad mentioned, a board member is going to expect to get questions at a board meeting tonight because of that. And so we're giving you a heads up to know that this conversation is out there. We've tried to address it on our Facebook page so people understand. One of the other things that have come up is related to this is how did my member vote? How did my area person vote? And this is often coming from the public, not from our members, of course. And as you all know, maybe not all of you, because you haven't all been delegates, we don't have an electronic voting system. We have over 300 delegates. They are voice votes. And rarely do we even need to do a count because they are such a large number in favor or opposed. This was another one that actually had a smattering of no's, but many, many more ayes, because Jen actually did some explanation during the actual process when it was removed to kind of try to explain that this was not about current, things going on or in the COVID space. So I bring it up to let you know that that's out there. And so if you hear something, in your district, and you weren't at Delegate Assembly, or you didn't have somebody at it, that no, MASB didn't all of a sudden take a position on the COVID vaccine and whether kids should take it. That's not the case, but just know that topic is out there. I see that a lot of people are posting, and some are posting on this very issue. I will go through the comments that have been made and see what we can do, like where questions are. And let me see. And if you have any questions on this or other topics, throw your hand up and we'll start calling on you. But really think about those that are on with us beyond me: Brad, Jen, Greg, Jay, Stacy, from a communication standpoint. If you have thoughts, concerns, ways that we can help you related to the topic that I brought up at the beginning, which is what are you still hearing at your district level? We're just trying to figure out ways that we can support all of you. Let's see. Well, I see some people, a number of people posting that they have already received your contact on the resolution. You know, I wonder, Brad, I know you and we were just talking before this meeting, maybe it is something just because it's kind of spun up in certain circles, whether we maybe share an email with our members, you know, quickly, whether it be today or tomorrow, with an explanation of the vote in the process. And that way you would all have something to respond with in your districts. I don't know if that would be helpful, if you think you've kind of got it under control and it's not a big deal. I don't know what the most helpful thing would be to deal with in this space. You're a quiet bunch today. Mary, I see your hands up.
Thanks, Don. I will share quickly. I had sent a note to Jen yesterday about that resolution, and I was able to explain it to my board from remembering what Jen had said at the meeting, and it was just what you had said. Because somebody did, it was interesting. Somebody in our community sent an email from an anonymous person who was discussing how I was voting for the resolution, et cetera, et cetera. So I explained it all to my board. I appreciate Jen's description when we were at the conference. That was really helpful. I will just mention one thing that's been going on with us now too. We've got the pro-mask choice folks showing up loud, very loud at our meetings, and they've turned to anti-vaccine folks now, as we have a vaccine clinic scheduled for Friday, and we're getting the form letters now from the Unmasked Oxford group that is saying we're going to come protest the vaccines. We shouldn't be giving vaccines on school property, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's going on with our public right here. Now they're anti-vax.
Thank you for that, Mary. I see somebody posted, and it's interesting. I just had this conversation yesterday. As people are talking about what is being, you know, kind of protested at your districts or commented on, and you know, DE&I is one, but Erica, you brought up in your district the social emotional learning, and you know, I've started seeing this over the last couple of months that's the next space, and I just did. We recorded yesterday my podcast, and it's the one that'll be scheduled out for next Saturday over Thanksgiving weekend. And I'm interviewing the superintendent of the year from Ferndale. And that exactly is a topic that we talked about, because in Ferndale, they have a history of doing a lot of work in SEL. And of course, many of you as districts coming out of the pandemic, the social emotional learning space and our kids and what they've had to deal with coming out of the pandemic and still today is becoming a huge thing. And I really hope that our schools don't back away from SEL with our kids. It's so, I mean, our last issue of Leaderboard as a magazine was about this space for kids and the troubles and traumas that they bring to our schools, and to think that somehow we would start ignoring that because it gets tied into CRT and DE&I and all of that. I just think we would do a tremendous disservice to our kids. But It's still an issue that I see, Ken, you posted just the same thing on SEL. So it is one that we just, we, as I said, just talked about on the podcast, and we're going to have to see is how we can try to elevate that conversation to a level where we can clearly delineate that. I mean, we might all know it, but it is not a space in the CRT space at all. It's about helping kids from a kind of mental health, well-being, and understanding each other's space. And it's just too bad that we've gotten there.
Yeah, and if I expand a little bit down on my comment, there's SEL, and I have already seen signs at board meetings, CRT, DEIB, and SEL, none of it. So those are starting to get tied together, at least in our district of Hudsonville. And also more specifically, the ruler, RULER approach or method that we adopted out of Yale, that tool, which I'm sure some are familiar with. Folks have done they do a lot of digging around this stuff, and now they found that one of the authors of Ruler made some comments around CRT or DEIB or something. And so they really hone in on the Ruler, and now it's expanding out to the SEL.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification, Ken. And I see others that, and I heard a couple of districts before this, and I don't know if I'll say Myfi, the survey that a lot of our school districts use. I've heard of a couple districts running into problems. I see people posting that here as well. And, it's this, for those that aren't familiar, it is a survey that districts can use and often use on an annual basis to kind of gauge the issues that are kind of on the forefront of the minds of their kids, and also then with that survey data figure out how to serve their student population. But there are some questions in it that get into children's sexual activity, maybe sexual orientation. I think there might even be drug use in questions in there. But it is to give you like really a good, and it's anonymous, but to give you a good understanding of your student body and what you should put in place to help them, and what issues that you may not be aware of that need to be dealt with. But because of the type of questions, and often what I've heard from other districts is somebody sees maybe high school questions that are different than the child questions, and I can't believe you're asking my kid this, when in fact you haven't asked their kid that, but you've asked kids that are older that question. But because everything typically gets put out in a Facebook space, there's no context to the question when a parent or a citizen posts it, and it's really started causing that pushback. And I can see that it's expanding in the chat, just based on what I'm seeing there. Brad did a response to a board member on the vaccination space. He's offered to put that into the chat, so I said, sure, do that, to give you a little bit of more information. Adele, you asked, are the Myfi surveys required? I don't know that. I don't think that they are. Brad, I don't know if you've dealt with any questions on that survey, or Jen. I know that, like I said, I've talked to a couple of board members on it, but I think it's voluntary on the basis of the district, but I know lots and lots use it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it being required by law or rule.
That's what I thought. And
I don't think so either. And it's also a national thing. There is a national Facebook group out there that is trying to say that this is invading our students' privacy. And they're ginning up some of the opposition to the idea of doing that survey. But they're also one of the groups that is trying to say that SEL and CRT are combined. So it probably has a different name in other states, but we're not the only state who does it.
So this survey can be then edited the way that a district wants it to be?
Yes, that is correct, Adele. Yeah, I've actually talked to some districts that have on their own removed certain questions to try to address, parental or citizen concerns within their community while still getting, useful information. It doesn't, maybe it affects. I mean, if you remove a question, it shouldn't affect validity of a survey tool as an instrument. It's just you're not gonna have the full picture of some of the things, but yes, districts can remove questions. Stacy Bogard, somebody, I made the comment, I posted on Facebook the clarification. Can we either pull that out and post it in the chat or do a link to that piece so that people can see that as well?
Yeah, I'll pull it in right now. Erica, did you have something to share?
I was just gonna say, kind of going back to what we're seeing at our board meetings, what we're seeing across the country and, specifically down in Texas and some other states where superintendents have been let go for making stands and various different things. And I think that, I start to see on our board where some board members really start to kind of be less strong in their voice with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think that, for example, even when MASB put out the leaderboard article and talked about those 14 schools that are doing this pilot program and those kind of things, I think that any support from MASB for our Michigan school boards is just crucial because that article in particular, I shared with our board members to continue to have confidence in moving in that direction. We rolled out a resolution. And so, I just want to, applaud MASB for that support, just because I think we get so much pressure coming in from all these different angles, and it starts to get people to kind of question where they're at and what they're thinking. So I just wanted to say I appreciate that. And, it's just, it's kind of a fear moving forward. I mean, I've been physically threatened just the position of being threatened as a board member to that they're going to vote us out type of thing, which is also scary. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate that, Erica. And I think I said it in the first communication this summer on CRT. Clearly, if you are at annual conference or even saw the schedule for our early bird session, as an organization, and we've heard it from our members, we are not stepping away from the DE&I space. We want to be available to actually help you have the tough conversations in your districts. This is not, even though some try to move that, it's not about CRT. It is about that inclusive environment so kids feel comfortable learning. And we just want to try to create a process so that we can be very transparent. If you work with us, with your community, so they see it as such. Will people still object to it? Probably. But we think it's important. And it's, when I say we, it's our board of directors and us as staff, but really supported by our membership, that this is still an important issue. And districts that are going to choose because of their community politics in their community to not use our services, that's absolutely fine. We're not trying to say that everybody has to do this. We're just trying to make sure that those districts, as you said, that are in the space that are trying are supported by things that we're putting out. So I appreciate you bringing it up as well. Stan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for board members who may be feeling less strong, and I certainly understand that there's a lot of that going around, and I've had my own moments. We had a teacher stand up at not last night's meeting, but the Monday before, who introduced himself. He's a high school teacher, and he said that he was there in support of any and all staff members who choose an atmosphere of inclusion in their classrooms. And I won't read his whole statement. It was only about 2 minutes long, but he ended up by saying, we represent a system of public education where all students of diverse backgrounds are welcome to come and learn. There are educational institutions where one belief and/or lifestyle can dominate and students can be sheltered from diversity, but this particular institution is not one of them. And that was really, really powerful. I could see that our board reacted to that. Even a few members of the public who were there to criticize CRT and SEL, and lately it's been LGBTQ literature in our classrooms. Even some of them reacted to that. And that's a message that we have not been shy about sharing with parents who continue to push and push and push on these issues where we know that they are a small minority of our district. We've said Mona Shores may not be the right place for your student and your family, and we will help you choose an alternate place if that's the right solution for you.
Thanks for that, Stan. I appreciate it. I had a similar conversation this summer, a parent talking about the district that I live in, and CRT had become an issue of public comment, at their board meeting. And, they don't know what I do for a living. So I was able just to have a conversation with this other parent and say, well, I'm like, no, they stated that CRT is not it's not a part of anything that they do. I said, what they're really trying to do is, and I kind of talked about diversity and equity. And as a parent, that parent said, oh, I'm good with that. And I think that is the space that we run right now, is we have a lot of parents getting co-opted into these discussions. And I said it in my second email on CRT this year, like, the more transparent that we can be as districts, whether it be by a teacher speaking like you're referring to, Stan, or as a district saying, here's what we're doing in our district. I think for most parents, and citizens for that matter, they're going to read that and say, well, this is not a problem. Like, what you're doing for your kids to lift them up, give them access, put them on equal footing. I think most parents and citizens will say, yeah, that's appropriate. But in a vacuum, if they aren't hearing that and all they're hearing is Facebook chatter, they define you and what you're doing in your school district. So I think any level of transparency that you can put out there for what you are doing specifically, I think it can help. It's not going to stop people from showing up at your boards, but I think it can be helpful.
Don, if I could just add one thing, because you talked about putting our position out there. We've had brilliant success over the last 2 or 3 months with the superintendent just doing little snippets during his superintendent report presentation about what we think the public is there to talk to us about, and just lay out the facts. And it helps make sure that the board is on the same page, and it helps make sure that everyone who's there to talk to us understands what we're actually doing. And I am absolutely confident that that process basically tamped down public comment on one particular issue a couple of months ago, because people were coming with a misconception. So we cleared that misconception up at the beginning of the meeting, not as part of responding to the public comment and the folks who were there to go nuts about something they were wrong about, but just as part of, here's an update for the board on what we're doing in this space. It's fantastically successful. We've done it 2 or 3 times. We're probably going to do it again next month.
Thanks, Dan. See, Sean posted a comment, and I don't think we, Brad, this would be one for you. I don't think that we recommend one or the other. Sean put public comment at beginning of the agenda. I have heard of, districts that have, practiced that for a while. Some have moved away from it because after 2 hours of public comment, the board is so burnt out, they really can't focus on the business meeting at hand that they're expecting it. But I've heard of others that have done that so that they can get through it and then get to I think there's a different views. Brad, I'm correct that there's no right or wrong on whether it's at the beginning or the end of a meeting.
Yeah, that's correct, Don. The important thing is it has to be in compliance with your approved either bylaw or public comment rules. Most bylaws allow for flexibility as far as where you put public comment for meeting to meeting. It will state public comment shall be where it's identified on the agenda. And then, usually your board president and superintendent are developing the agenda together so they can determine where public comment is going to be based on that bylaw from meeting to meeting. And then another important point is, once you put it on the agenda, you don't have to post your agenda. So, if it's at the beginning of the meeting and someone misses out on that part of the meeting, they come in late, they don't have the opportunity to participate. That's certainly a rule that you can enforce, that you can only address the board during the public comment portion of the meeting, and someone misses out, they'll have to wait until the next meeting.
Thanks for that, Brad. As I listen to people talk and these comments that are going through, one of the things that I've seen in some of the Facebook posts is, oh, I've emailed the district and I haven't heard back, or I've made comment in public comment and I've never gotten a response. And so I don't know what every district, does. I'm assuming in most cases, if there's an email sent to your superintendent or a board member, that somebody will often respond in that space. It seems logical. I mean, looking at MASB's experience, I try to do the same thing if it's an actual email communication. Public comment, clearly we tell you not to get in that back and forth space. That can make public comment last 6 days, but know that there's some balance in what you do there. But what do you have for as a practice when you, and Stan, what you said kind of, I think, addresses a little bit kind of ahead of time. But if you're at a meeting the week, you're at last month's meeting and you've had, say 5 questions raised that don't get answered at it because that's not what you do. And some of them are, say, questions that could be addressed. Do you use the next meeting's time for your soup to be able to, is there a method that you have? I just think of what I'm seeing some school boards getting beat up for. And I'm just wondering what the common practice is in how do you respond, at least on those more thematically, not that I have to respond to Stan, who was there for public comment, but do you have a practice of addressing things at least thematically in your board meetings to say, hey, at the last meeting, these things were brought up and I want to create some clarification and answer some of the questions that were raised. Interested, I think, in how you handle that. It might help others that are in a similar space. Mary, I see you have your hand up.
So as a practice in Oxford, up until a lot of this point, anybody who's come forward for public comment will get some type of response from the superintendent or from the board president. We've been getting, and we usually don't talk about it at the next meeting unless it is something big, unless there's a lot of questions about it or a lot of comments about it. We also have tried to explain situations like the Oakland County Health Division's mask mandate. We try to explain things before public comment to quell all of the comments, letting people know we hear what they've been saying for the last couple months, and a reminder, this is where we're at. So sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But we do respond to all of the folks who come forward for public comment. We get a lot of those form emails, and actually I'm a little unsure if I should just, because you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. I can answer the emails that I get and say, thank you for, sharing your opinion, or thank you for your email. But then people will come back at public comment saying, all you do is respond with, thank you for your email, and you never do anything. Well, there's nothing really we can do. And then if I don't respond, then nobody responds to my emails. So I guess it's better to err on at least acknowledging that somebody said something. I just got this one email, the whole board got it, but it called me out specifically on this board resolution. So I wish I had to think about that for a little bit, because I really don't want to address that with this particular person. But I think it will just be, again, thank you for sharing, sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the sharing of that. Other ways that people try to address the public, because I think clearly, whether it's factual or not, we see that folks saying that you don't respond to them and there's no answers, and I think it continues to spin things up in a way that puts a face on boards that I don't think truly represents what you're all doing.
One thing.
Posted. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
This is Erica. Just one thing we've been doing when there's such misinformation presented. For example, we had an infectious disease doctor come and speak at our board meeting about, masking and why and the blah, blah, blah. And, then a public commenter got up afterwards and said, he's not even a certified doctor, don't listen to him, blah, kind of thing. And so what we've been doing to make sure that the public, instead of getting into a debate, what's happening is then when we as a board are having our discussions, we'll implement, just to clarify, Dr. Ledke, the infectious disease doctor, is a certified infectious disease doctor, and blah, 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 blah. So if there is blatant misinformation that's very obvious, we've tried to correct it in that way, more in a conversation, not necessarily like during public comment, so that another public commenter can't get up and debate what you just said. So that's what we've been doing, just because we've had so much misinformation. So that's been helpful. And even the superintendent has also kind of done the same thing. To address the public commenter that stated X, Y, and Z, that's in fact not the truth. And here, so.
Thank you. John, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Don, one of the things that we do, and I'm sure a lot of districts do, but for public comment for board meetings, if someone has a public comment and they have a question that they'd like to have answered, they have to fill out a form and give it to the board secretary, and they have their questions on there. That's been reasonably helpful with us with responding back to people. Obviously, though, with the way things have gone in recent months for everybody's district, sometimes you're looking at forms and there's 8 questions on one form and you're spending some time responding to those. But then we always take the response, staple it right to the form and keep those on record, because you get a lot of situations where I didn't hear back, right? Whatever. So that's there. And then, like was also mentioned, we've done some things with superintendent reports at the beginning of the meeting if we think there's going to be some issues too.
Thank you for that. I know somebody mentioned form letters or form emails as well. And I can remember, and Jen was in this space as legislative staff people, they get all kinds of form letters in that space. And, in the end, you figure out, and even like we use as an example today with people talking about vaccination, we in essence at MASB create a response that helps to answer that question. And that way we share the same thing with everybody that comes up in that vein. It's not like us answering a form letter with a form letter, but our response then remains consistent. And I think even between the superintendent and a board of education, if there is a communication going out that will say, here's how we're going to answer this, sharing that with the board members so that when you get addressed, in the supermarket or something like that, grocery store, that you can have the same answer that the superintendent gave in a response to email, so that everybody's speaking from the same page. Otherwise, that's where the wedge gets pushed in there, is when the board doesn't know how the superintendent responded to that specifically, and now you're trying to be in the same page, but you say something different, and people try to take advantage of that. So even when it's a form letter, I think I wouldn't spend a ton of staff time on it, but at the same time, it seems like creating a response that addresses the question, and then it's just sending that same one out to everyone that sends that form letter in, still gives you the ability to say, we communicated. And I love the idea of attaching the response so that you can show, nope, on this date, we sent this communication, so that nobody can accuse you of not responding.
I had a quick question related to something that was in the chat. The people that talked about having 2 public comments, one specific to the agenda and one on anything else, is that cool? Is that copacetic? You know what I mean? Like, I guess it's for Brad.
Yep.
Yeah, that is fine. Nick, so the key is at least having one opportunity to address the board on anything that's within the board's jurisdiction. So if you do have 2 opportunities for public comment, you could limit one opportunity just for agenda items. And then if someone does attempt during that public comment to address a matter that's not on the agenda, your board president would rule that person out of order, so to speak, and have them wait until the second opportunity for public comment where they can address anything within the board's jurisdiction. So yeah, that's the only time you can limit public comment to agenda items, if you have two opportunities for public comment.
I'm typing a response right now. Oops, I spelled it wrong, but I was responding to Sean's chat about cautious responding to emails. And I think, that is the space when you're creating those responses. It can't be anybody knocking out a response. It really, I would expect it's likely coming. It might come from the board president or the superintendent, but it's probably the superintendent and his or her staff spending some time talking about it. How do we respond? Like, knocking it around a little bit, just like we do here at MASB, so that the district feels good about what you're putting out and that it's going to be hard to be taken out of context. So even if a group shares it on Facebook, you are comfortable with what you've put down in writing. And yes, they can still play around with it. They can still cut, a sentence out of a letter and post only that. But I would agree, you do not want to respond if it's I'll just respond to this. Like that's a risky space. It needs a lot of thought when you're putting together something in response to your public. And I see, Stan, the president speaks for the board, including on email. I would still encourage in that case, if you can coordinate with, your administrative staff just to make sure that things are going out in the right way, and that everybody's on the same page in that space. As I said earlier, Sean, I saw you went off mute for a second. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just touch base and just share some information. We have a few groups of, I call them parent hate groups. It might be a little bit extreme, but what we're doing now is we're monitoring their activity on Facebook. And it has been very helpful with regards to us preparing for meetings and knowing what it is that is likely going to be discussed or disclosed or shared during public comment. Because when you get an ambush, it upsets board members and the individuals who are there supporting the district and the work that's being done. And the intel that we've received by doing this has been very beneficial. And it is a little bit time consuming, but when you find out that information, you're able to head it off, sometimes in a communication that's sent out to the entire district before the board meeting takes place. So it kind of ruins the intent of what they're there to do in that particular night. So I just advise if you're interested in doing something like that, find some people in your district that can help you out, and maybe even it's some parents that are in your community so that you can find out what's going on, because there are groups in every district that are trying to sabotage the good work that's taking place in schools and to paint a very ugly picture. So I just wanted to just share that. Sorry, Don, go ahead.
Oh, no, this is an opportunity for you to share. This is exactly, it's not us talking. It's really for you to share with each other the great ideas that you're putting forth on how to handle this, because MASB does not have all the answers. We're not on the ground where you are dealing with this. So I appreciate anything that you suggest to each other. I think that can be very helpful. And I think that advice that you just gave, Sean, is a good path to take as well. As I said, I know we have Greg and Jay on. If you've got questions in the superintendent search space or kind of what that looks like, it does look like turnover will be, pretty high again this year based on our early, contacts from school districts. We are expecting a lot of soups to turn over and move towards retirement again this year. Clearly stress because of COVID and the pandemic has caused the board, in some districts, the board soup relationship to be frayed. So that, can cause vacancies. And, we're already busy in that space, but I was willing to help have conversations with districts in that.
Hey, Don, can I ask one more question relative to board meetings?
Yes.
I'd be curious, any insights that others may have relative to public response to comments? So clapping, our practice is my practice is I just sort of power through it, and get the next speaker up there and kind of work through it. I know others will recess meetings when there's clapping to try and keep that in control. Anybody have any practices there to share? Allow it, don't allow it.
Yeah, this is Nick from Rockford, and I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this. I'm okay to try it, but we did in our last meeting. Let's just say I'm the vice president and our president both have, let's just say one of our strong suits is not being a slow erupting volcano. So we have now tried for one meeting having a trained negotiator who happens to be an assistant superintendent facilitate the public comment. She's very good at that stuff and diffusing some things. We read this really long list, that talks about the clapping, the shouting down, and general decorum, comma, 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 comma. And of course, people are already on edge and we read them this long laundry list. So it worked out okay. Some people feel now like they're not actually talking to the board, but it worked out better. She can be more firm without completely alienating, the board president. So that's something we've tried once. I know our entire board isn't, 100% pleased with that approach, but it seems to be working at least in one meeting. It has diffused. She's a little more firm. She'll take that pause. I'll wait. And she'll just stare down the individual that might be, booing the school nurse or clapping someone else's comment. So they've tried to pull people in individually that have been disruptive, and that has worked somewhat. It's been a little bit better here in Rockford, but I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot there that is certainly not something MASB is trained on, but it's something we're trying here because we have the traveling group that probably makes their way to Ottawa County as well.
Great, thanks, Nick.
Appreciate that, Nick. And I said it earlier, they're in many cases, MASB doesn't have the answers. If you find something that works in your community, use it. I mean, that's important. I love what Casey from Sutton's Bay put in there, what they try to do. And, in a small district in particular, that seems like something that should work. Norris, I see that you had your hand up.
I was just going to quickly mention that we put the rules on the back of our agenda, but the only time we have I would say interrupted the audience from booing and stuff is we had a student give some suggestions on possibility of having prom, and she just happened to mention maybe we could wear masks, and the whole audience went booing, and that was the only time we told them they could not do that. I mean, this was her time to talk.
Thank you for that.
Jen Smith, there was a question in there about getting soups added to the critical list. You see that?
I see that. Has not been movement on the critical shortage list this time. And when it does move, superintendents are generally left off on purpose. I don't know if that changes after what we faced throughout the pandemic. But at this point, we don't have anything moving that addresses the critical shortage list, let alone adds superintendents.
On that space also, we had a conversation between MASA and MDE earlier. I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021. I have lost track of time, but they were moving in that direction. We've talked to them. We've said that superintendents are, and particularly interim superintendents, are in demand, and we need to figure that out. And sadly, what we saw when MDE, I think it lasted about a day and a half, they actually put them on critical shortage, or at least notified intent to do it. And in that period of time, what we ended up having, and the numbers weren't, it wasn't like 20 or 30, but very quickly, we saw a number of superintendents say that they were going to retire and then come back to work in their own district. And that clearly wasn't the intent of trying to put somebody on critical shortage. And very quickly, MASA had to go to MDE and say, we can't do this. It's not like in essence, we hurt ourselves as education in that space when that was the request that started coming, as opposed to, so I think if it comes back, it's going to have to be very nuanced and not be just an open kind of space for a critical shortage for superintendents. Principals might be a little bit different. There was a time where principals could contract back, and we did see some of that happening. That clearly your question's in a different space, but it can set up the same dynamic. I think one place, both for SUPs and principals, I believe, there is a section within the critical shortage law that if you, in essence, are able to show that the position has been open and you can't find qualified candidates, and I think it's listed as like within two neighboring ISDs apply to MDE to get a position like that on the list, there is a way to do that. So there is a way to kind of, I won't say get around it, but to work within the law to still put positions that are not specifically listed on there. Birgit's question, curious to know how many of your districts have a 3-minute or 5-minute public speaking time in your bylaw. See, Charles threw up a 3-minute finger, just 3 fingers. You can throw them in there. Brad, a question for you. You're still on, okay. I think you have said a 3-minute is about as short as you would say is appropriate for really allowing public comment.
Yeah, so there's an attorney general opinion that looks at public comment rules and sets a standard for those public comment rules, and they have to be reasonable, flexible, and encourage, public comment. So I've always interpreted that to mean you have to have a reasonable time limit, and I think 3 is reasonable. But if you go down to 2 or even 1, I think at that point you're not encouraging public comment. I actually like the idea of maybe starting out with 5 minutes and then having a rule that indicates that if, let's say you set 30 minutes or hour aside or 30 minutes aside for public comment, and then you can go from 5 minutes to 3 minutes if you're going to go beyond that 60 minutes that's been set aside for public comment. Now, obviously, you have to extend that beyond the 30 or 60 minutes in order to allow everyone to address the board. But that would give you a little bit of flexibility if you're at 5 minutes, having that option of going down to 3 if you have a large group that will exceed the allotment of time that you have for public comment on your agenda. But again, you have to definitely extend that beyond that allotment in order to allow everyone to address the board before you adjourn that meeting.
And Brad, Howard posted, and I've heard this before, about state entities.
Well, the redistricting commission is not subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Well, and even legislative committee, like there's times, and Jen can attest to this, right? They have a hearing on a bill and you don't even get a chance. So like school boards are subject differently than other entities on what public comment looks like and everything else. So trying to hold us up against whatever body that you choose isn't necessarily, I know universities are different than school districts. It seems like everybody is treated different as it comes to what public comment looks like if you have to have it.
And Brad,
Ron,
Brad, I think it was, I'm sorry. Brad, I think it was someone stated it earlier, and I think you said this in the past, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that some districts have started to move towards having a set time for public comment, 30 minutes, and then having another time at the end of the meeting to address anyone that wasn't able to address it within that first 30 minutes. Is that something that's still acceptable?
Yeah, and in fact, you could, again, have 30 minutes, and then if you exceed that, just simply table public comment until the end of the meeting, and then you would take it off the table to complete it. So you don't even have to have that second opportunity on your agenda. You could just have the one opportunity at the beginning, whether it be 60 or 30 minutes. If you go beyond that, then table it and then finish it up at the end of the meeting.
Okay, I see we're coming up on just a few minutes before 1 o'clock. Things outside of the meeting space, things outside of COVID and people coming in, just other questions in the kind of school space, school board space that you might have. Want to give you that opportunity to throw out other thoughts and other questions. I will throw out, we touched on it in conference, just so you all know. And I frankly, I wish that we weren't in this space. In some ways, I consider it a badge of honor for the work that Jen does or whatnot, or that we all do as a community representing MASB. But we are now seeing some real pushback against us as an association. We mentioned the legislation, House Bill 5424, to prevent school districts from even paying dues to MASB. I believe that's really to silence us. It was interesting in one of the Facebook threads this weekend on the vaccine mandate, our chair of education who sponsored House Bill 5424 comments and called the ALC weekend the weekend of brainwashing, which very clearly she is all about getting at MASB, not about supporting PD and everything else, like she said in her original testimony. She wants to bring us to an end. We also got noticed yesterday. We now have seen there's an MASB Watch Facebook page, and they are right now. It only looks like a couple of people. But posting things related to some of the NSBA related things. I think they had a post already on the vaccine resolution or communicable disease resolution. And it is being elevated. And I think they're coming at us because we've been effective in communicating your desires with the legislature. So that has stopped some of the things that people, that some legislators wanted to get passed. And it's too bad. I've been here a long time, and it's the first time I've seen that kind of go after MASB mentality. And we're going to stick to what we're doing to, be your ally here in Lansing, but your ally back in the district for the things that you need. But just know that they are, people are out there looking at us now. And frankly, if they come at us and they're not coming at you any longer, I'd rather take that off your plate. I don't think that's where we're at. But, I in some ways apologize that they elevate our association to this level. But I also understand that if they're elevating us to this level, I think it's probably because of our effectiveness in our advocacy more than it is anything else. Jan, will we receive evaluations for the sessions we attended at ALC? Yeah, you will actually receive an email both on the whole conference. It'll be your clinic sessions, CBA classes, the conference, the general session speakers, and that will go out this week to you. And then you'll have a couple of weeks to respond to that. And we encourage you to do so. That's how we're able to put together the programming we are when you provide that feedback. Yeah, I hope your comment about the watcher pages, it was actually Washington that brought it to our attention. So if nothing else, I guess team members, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to share quickly with them, Jen. Anything to share, or Greg or Brad or Stacy, give you that opportunity as well.
I'm going to put a plug in for Views from the Capitol. We're going to do a webinar on Monday, the 22nd. Some of it will be repetitive if you were at conference, but if you weren't at conference, then you get to hear it for the first time. But it's going to be what we expect in the final 5 weeks of the year.
I would say that we're getting close to that time of the year where a lot of you have either just recently completed or in the process of completing your superintendent evaluation. If you have any questions around superintendent evaluation, please give me a call and I'd be happy to help you out with that.
And for those of you getting to the end of the year, looking to get some more of those final CBAs in before the end of the year, we have our virtual CBA weekend in December coming up, starting on Friday, December 10th. And also, if any of you are newly elected or appointed, remembering that complimentary CBA 101 is available to you, and that opportunity will be running out at the end of the calendar year. So if you're newly elected or appointed, make sure you take advantage of that.
And for me, Don, just a reminder that when we begin the new year after December 31st, the ability to participate and vote at a board meeting becomes very, very limited. Right now, you can participate and vote under a medical condition, or because of a local state of emergency, or getting called away to military duty. After December 31st, it will only be limited to military duty, and that's going to be a major change for a lot of folks that go to a warmer place in the wintertime and still participate in their board meetings. You won't be able to do that this year.
Thanks, Brad. Justin, great question that you just posted. Justin posted, do board members have to be certified or have taken certain classes in order to run for the MASB Board of Directors? And I will say the only requirement is that you have CBA 101 and been on your board for 1 year when your nomination is submitted. That is in the current bylaws. That's changed over the years, but that's what it currently is. You will have seen an email that went out this week, yesterday, I believe, that went out to let you know which regions and which groups are open for election. And when I say open up for election, they may have one of our current MASB directors running, but our board has been very transparent in saying we want people to run, even if it means you're running against an incumbent. We do have two that are actually open with no incumbent running. Ruth Coppins from Saginaw ISD is retiring. Is that Region 5, Stacy or Jen? Actually, I probably have it right in front of me. Ruth is Region 4. So she is open, and also our Group 6 seat, which is our larger districts like Livonia, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, Walled Lake, and some of those also have a completely open seat. So consider that. Think about running for MASB's board. Our board is always looking for good people to be added to our board and help to govern and run this association. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me directly, and I can provide whatever, other information about what's your responsibility, how much time does it take, and all of that. But great question. I'm glad that question was asked, so I appreciate that. All right, it is 3 after 1. I don't want to take more of your time. Thanks for joining us today, and we will continue doing these. I think we're going to move to an every other month schedule, and then put things in between as needed. But thank you all.